The snow had just begun to melt in the sleepy Montana Valley as Staff Sergeant Ronan Blake stepped off the bus. The scent of pine and distant wood smoke filled the crisp air, a far cry from the scorching desert he just spent the last 11 months in. His uniform was worn, his boots dusty, but there was a quiet steadiness in his step. Home. It should have felt like peace. Ronan had served 15 years in the U.S. Air Force, mostly in logistics and communication. This last deployment, his third in 4 years, had taken more out of him than he expected. The constant movement, the silence between explosions, the emotional cost of being away from everything and everyone he loved. But he had one thought that kept him going, getting back to the old ranch his family had owned for generations. The land was his sanctuary. That ranch, nestled just outside of the small town of Redvale, was more than just property, it was his father's legacy. He was picked up by Sierra, his wife of 7 years. Her luxury SUV rolled into the snow-packed gravel drive like it belonged in another world. She emerged with perfect makeup and an expensive coat, her usual sharp elegance on full display. "There's my hero," she beamed, wrapping her arms around him. "God, I missed you." He smiled, though something in him felt off. He hadn't even made it to the porch yet and already the place felt different. The house looked nearly the same. Rustic wood siding, wind chimes his mother had hung years ago, the creak of the screen door as it opened. But inside, things had shifted. The furniture was rearranged. New appliances hummed in the kitchen. There were designer curtains where his mother had once sewn her own. "Wow," he said, keeping his voice light. "Looks like someone's been busy." Sierra grinned, brushing her auburn hair from her face. "Had to keep things running while you were out being a hero. Your mom's been... well, it hasn't been easy." Ronan went to his old room to unpack and found it repurposed as a home office. His childhood bed was gone. Boxes of old family photos sat in the closet, unceremoniously labeled. Something gnawed at him, but he brushed it aside. Re-entry always took time. It was later that night, after his mother had gone to bed, that he stumbled upon the folder. He had been searching for old photo albums in the study, his father's study, with the heavy walnut desk and the wall full of military plaques. When he opened the bottom drawer, he found a leather-bound folder marked Blake Family Estate, updated. Ronan sat down and opened it. Page after page detailed a revised estate trust. The original trust, drafted by his father, meticulously structured to keep the ranch in the family, was gone. In its place was a new document that named Sierra as the primary trustee and beneficiary. His mother, Lorna Blake, was listed as a secondary beneficiary. The date of the amendment? 5 months into his deployment. The air in the study went cold. He read the document again. Then a third time. It was legal. Notarized. Stamped. His father had been clear, "This land stays in our bloodline. No sales, no transfers. It's a legacy, Ronan." But somehow, in his absence, that ironclad trust had been rewritten. "Everything okay in here?" Sierra's voice drifted in from the doorway. Ronan looked up to see her leaning against the frame in silk pajamas, wearing the sapphire earrings he'd mailed her from overseas. Her smile was relaxed, confident. Too confident. "Just going through some things," he replied, closing the folder. "Your mom's paperwork was a disaster," she said, walking in and perching on the arm of a chair. "I had to fix it while you were away. She was falling behind on everything. I handled the taxes, utilities, organized the accounts." "You redid the trust?" She agreed, Sierra said smoothly. Honestly, she didn't even blink. Said she didn't want to be burdened with it anymore. Ronan didn't reply. He just stared down at the closed folder in his lap. "You're probably exhausted," Sierra continued, brushing a hand across his shoulder. "Let's not talk about all this now. You just got home. Take time to adjust." That night, Ronan sat on the porch long after Sierra went to bed. The moonlight danced through the tall pines, shadows of a time before things got complicated. He tried to breathe, but the air felt thinner somehow. This wasn't just a simple oversight. This wasn't just helping his mother. It felt like an ambush. He thought of his father again. A stern man with a slow, thoughtful way of speaking. "Never yell when you can plan," he used to say. The loudest man in the room usually has the least to say. Ronan didn't yell. Instead, the next morning, he kissed Sierra goodbye as she headed off to her job at the boutique financial firm she worked for. He told her he planned to spend the day with his mother. What she didn't see was the folder he slipped into the inside pocket of his jacket. The wheels had begun to turn. And deep down, Ronan already knew, this homecoming wasn't a return to peace. It was the beginning of war. The diner was quiet that morning. Snow still dusted the sidewalks outside, but inside Millie's kitchen, warmth and the scent of coffee created a comforting bubble of nostalgia. Ronan hadn't been there in years, not since before his last deployment. It was the place where his parents used to eat every Sunday, sitting at the booth by the window, sharing black coffee and fried eggs. He'd brought his mother there today for a simple reason: privacy. Lorna sat across from him, bundled in her navy blue coat, her eyes brighter than they'd been in weeks. She sipped her coffee with slightly trembling hands and offered the waitress a smile that seemed more rooted in old habit than real joy. "How have you been, really?" Ronan asked once they'd ordered. "Oh, you know," she said, adjusting the scarf around her neck. "Getting by. Sierra's been helping a lot. Driving me to appointments, paying bills, keeping things in order." Ronan watched her carefully. There was a flicker of uncertainty in her expression, a vague hesitation when she mentioned the help. "I found the new estate documents," he said gently. Lorna frowned. "The what?" "The trust papers. The ones you signed a few months back. About the house. The land." She blinked several times, confused. "I signed something?" "Sierra said it was just to help with the bills. I didn't read it, really. I trusted her. She said it was what you would want." Ronan's stomach twisted. "Did she explain what the documents were for?" "I think so," Lorna said softly. "Bank things, insurance maybe. She brings me so much to sign, and I get all mixed up these days." He reached across the table and gently took her hand. "You didn't do anything wrong, Mom." But inside, his thoughts were racing. This wasn't forgetfulness. This was exploitation. Back home, while his mother napped in her recliner, Ronan stepped outside and called Mason Rivera again. "She doesn't remember signing anything," he whispered. "She says Sierra handles everything. Brings her papers and tells her where to sign." "Textbook manipulation," Mason replied. "And if your mom's cognitive ability is declining, that trust amendment could be invalidated. But we'll need proof. A medical diagnosis would help, especially if the decline began before the papers were signed. I'll schedule an appointment first thing tomorrow. Also," Mason added, "don't confront Sierra. Not yet. Let's keep the cards close." The next day, Ronan drove his mother to Dr. Evelyn Hart, a geriatric specialist in the nearby town of Millstone. The office was quiet, filled with soft jazz and the hum of fluorescent lights. After an hour of testing, Dr. Hart emerged with a serious expression. "Early-stage dementia," she said. "The symptoms suggest this has been developing for over a year. Memory gaps, trouble with executive function, confusion over simple tasks." Ronan exhaled slowly. "And she wouldn't have been fit to sign legal documents?" "Not likely," Dr. Hart said. "At the very least, she would have needed a medical advocate to oversee anything that's significant." Armed with the diagnosis, Ronan felt a strange mix of sorrow and resolve. He'd suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed added a painful finality to everything. His mother had been vulnerable. And someone had used the vulnerability to gain control. That evening, he waited until after dinner to speak with Sierra. They sat at the kitchen island, she with a glass of red wine, he with a cup of black coffee. The air between them was taut, like a cable stretched to its limit. "I took Mom to see a specialist today," Ronan began. "Oh?" Sierra replied without looking up. "Is she all right?" "She's showing signs of dementia. The doctor believes it's been progressing for more than a year." Sierra paused, her wine glass halfway to her lips. "That's terrible," she said after a moment. "I've noticed some forgetfulness." "Yes. Before or after she signed the trust documents?" he asked casually. Her expression didn't change, but something behind her eyes flickered, just for a second. "What are you implying, Ronan?" "Just trying to understand the timeline. For the doctors. For legal clarity. I've been the one handling everything while you were playing war games overseas," she snapped suddenly. "Who do you think's been managing the bills? The doctor's appointments? Her safety?" "I'm not accusing," he said calmly. "I'm just asking questions." Her posture stiffened. "Every decision I made was for your mother's benefit. If she agreed to sign the trust, it was because it made sense. I'm not the bad guy here." "I'd like to see the documentation," Ronan said. Sierra stood abruptly. "I don't appreciate being interrogated in my own home. Not after everything I've sacrificed." With that, she stormed out, keys in hand. The door slammed behind her, echoing down the hallway. Ronan sat alone in the quiet kitchen, sipping his coffee. He didn't move for a long while. The next morning, his phone rang. It was the bank. "There's been a failed attempt to access your savings account," the representative said. Multiple incorrect password entries from an unknown device. The account was in his name alone. Later that afternoon, while organizing some of his mother's mail, Ronan came across a certified envelope. Inside was a letter from Maple Creek Living, a high-end assisted care facility. It confirmed Lorna Blake's move-in date for next month. The letter bore her signature, dated just 3 days after Ronan had returned home. He showed the letter to his mother. "I don't remember this," she said, bewildered. "Did I say I was moving there?" "You signed this form," he replied gently. "I don't want to leave my home, Ronan. I promised your father I'd stay here." That night, he changed the passwords on every account he owned. And then he made another call. "Mason," he said, his voice low, steady. "It's worse than we thought." Ronan had always believed in structure, plans, procedures, discipline. It was what kept him alive in conflict zones. But what he was facing now didn't follow any military rules of engagement. There were no clear enemy lines, no defined objectives. Just quiet manipulation and layers of betrayal hidden beneath polite smiles. By the third week of his return, Ronan had stopped pretending he was just adjusting to civilian life. He had shifted fully into investigation mode, quietly, methodically. Every move was measured. Every smile he gave Sierra was practiced. While she chatted about kitchen renovations and hosting a spring fundraiser, he met with a forensic accountant referred to him by Mason. Her name was Rachel Dan, a sharp, no-nonsense professional with an eagle eye for inconsistencies. He brought her all the documentation he'd collected, the trust amendment, the bank statements, the mysterious joint accounts, the assisted living deposit. By the time she finished her preliminary review, her expression was grim. "Mr. Blake, this wasn't sloppy bookkeeping. It's systematic. A large portion of the family's assets, particularly those that were in long-term investment accounts, were transferred to liquid funds under co-ownership with your wife. Over $75,000 has been moved in under 6 months. The paper trail ends with several household purchases, large ATM withdrawals, and at least one untraceable Venmo account." Ronan leaned back in the chair. "Can we recover it?" "Some. Not all. Especially if it's been laundered or moved offshore." Ronan's pulse slowed, but his mind raced. He had to keep gathering evidence before Sierra caught wind of how close he was. His next stop was the county clerk's office. He needed the original, official copy of the amended trust, one that hadn't passed through Sierra's hands. The clerk, a grandmotherly woman named Etta, squinted at the request but eventually returned with the folder. "Blake Family Trust Amendment," she said, sliding the papers across the counter. "Signed and notarized about 5 months ago." Ronan flipped through the pages until he found what he was looking for. The notary stamp read, "Lauren Ellis." He frowned. That name sounded familiar. "Does Lauren work in the clerk's office?" he asked. Etta shook her head. "Oh no. She's with a private law firm downtown, Ellis & McCrae. She's also the niece of that real estate developer." "What's her name?" "Tara Fielding." "Fancy crowd. Real estate developer." The phrase echoed in Ronan's head. That night, while Sierra prepared grilled salmon and opened a new bottle of wine, Ronan nodded through her updates about hiring a landscaping firm for when the renovation started. His stomach twisted at how casually she was planning to remodel a home she had no right to control. He smiled. "I've been thinking," he said between bites. "Maybe we should consider expanding the guest house like you said. Something nice for Mom, before we even think about assisted living." Sierra tilted her head. "That's surprisingly open-minded of you." He shrugged. "You've done a lot. Maybe it's time I started supporting some of your ideas." That night, after she fell asleep, he quietly unlocked her laptop. The password was easy, the name of her favorite wine. Inside her files, he found more than he expected. A spreadsheet labeled Red Veil Development, Phase 1 detailed costs and ROI projections for subdividing the ranch property into 7 lots. There were email drafts addressed to developers, one even listed potential profit if the house were demolished and replaced with a modern eco-retreat. But the most damning document? A scanned letter of intent to sell the entire southern pasture, the land his father had loved most. The letter was unsigned. But the draft was there. The next day, Ronan visited Ellis & McCrae unannounced. The receptionist's smile faltered slightly when he gave his name. Lauren Ellis came out 5 minutes later, clearly nervous. "You notarized a trust amendment for my mother," he said without greeting. "Yes, Mr. Blake. I did. All proper. Was my mother present?" She hesitated. "I was told she had signed it in advance. Your wife brought it in. You didn't witness the signature? I trusted that your wife." "That's not how notary law works," he snapped. Did you even check my mother's ID? Did you speak to her at all? Lauren swallowed. No. I didn't. Ronan stepped back. Thank you for confirming. He left without another word. Mason called him later that evening. Lauren's firm just reached out. They're self-reporting the violation to the state bar. It means they're worried. You've rattled the right cage. That same night, Sierra approached him in the kitchen again. We need to talk about your mother, she said gently. The assisted living community called. They need a final answer. Already? I put down a deposit. It's non-refundable after Friday. How much was it? $15,000. He nodded. From our account? No, she said quickly. From your mother's trust account. She would have wanted that. The lie was seamless. Polished. But Ronan had already visited the facility earlier that day. The director had told him the deposit was only $5,000. And that there were plenty of rooms available, no waiting list, no urgency. Sierra was skimming even from the scam. That night, he made his decision. He moved all of his personal items into the guest bedroom. When Sierra asked, he blamed sleep issues. Too much tossing and turning from the deployment, he said with a smile. The truth was, he could no longer share a room with someone who had calculated his mother's downfall like it was a business plan. 2 days later, Rachel Tan called with final confirmation. Over $42,000 in credit card debt had been paid off using Lorna's account. Most of the purchases were designer clothing, spa treatments, and large Venmo transfers labeled as consulting fees. She's bleeding the estate dry, Rachel said. And she's covering her tracks. Ronan thanked her, then called Mason. We're ready, he said. File for emergency guardianship. And initiate proceedings to invalidate the trust amendment. Already on it, Mason replied. The storm was coming. And this time, Ronan wouldn't be caught off guard. The morning sun hadn't even broken through the winter clouds when Ronan stood in front of the district courthouse, collar turned up against the cold. The frost in the air felt oddly cleansing, sharp, real. Inside the courthouse walls, everything was set in motion. He wasn't just a veteran returning home anymore. He was a man fighting to reclaim his family's legacy. 3 days earlier, Mason had filed the emergency petition, guardianship of Lorna Blake, an injunction to freeze the amended trust, and a motion to initiate full forensic review of all financial activities tied to Sierra Blake over the past 18 months. The evidence had been overwhelming. Medical testimony proving early onset dementia, dating back before the amended trust was signed. Bank documents showing unauthorized withdrawals and the creation of joint accounts without Lorna's understanding. The fraudulent notarization by Lauren Ellis, confirmed as a violation of state protocol. Sierra's own paper trail, uncovered by the private investigator Ronan had hired. It included real estate consultations, emails about subdividing the land, luxury shopping receipts, and, most surprisingly, an apartment lease in downtown Billings under Sierra's maiden name, signed 6 months ago. Sierra had been preparing to disappear. She just hadn't counted on Ronan catching up so quickly. The court hearing was scheduled for the following morning. But before that, Ronan needed one final conversation with the woman who had once shared his dreams. That night, Sierra found him on the back porch again, wrapped in an old flannel coat, staring at the starlit sky. You've been distant, she said, stepping outside with a glass of wine in hand. Just thinking, he replied. I know you've had a lot on your plate. But we need to make decisions about your mother. The longer we wait, the harder it'll be. She doesn't want to leave her home. Of course she doesn't, Sierra said, her voice softening. But it's not safe anymore. You've seen her. She forgets where she is, leaves the stove on. The facility is the best option. And the trust can handle the cost. Ronan nodded slowly, sipping his tea. That's the trust you changed while I was gone? Sierra froze. Her voice shifted immediately. I didn't change it. I updated it. With her consent. She didn't understand what she was signing. Sierra's face stiffened. What are you trying to say, Ronan? I'm saying we need to go over everything. The accounts. The investments. The deposit for the assisted living facility. All of it. I already told you, she said, now clearly agitated. The deposit was $15,000, non-refundable. It's done. I spoke to the facility, Ronan said, his voice calm. They received $5,000. Not 15. There was a pause. Then, for the first time, Sierra's mask slipped. You think I'm stealing? She said, her tone laced with disbelief. After everything I've done? You moved money, changed legal documents, and leased a second residence under your maiden name, Ronan replied, still even-toned. "What should I think?" Sierra's eyes flashed, but she turned away. "I don't have to justify anything to you." "No," Ronan said. "But tomorrow morning, you'll need to justify it to a judge." She turned sharply. "What?" "There's a hearing. 9 a.m. Judge Hartley's courtroom." She stared at him, wine glass trembling slightly in her hand. "You've been planning this all along," she whispered. "Pretending like we're okay. Smiling. Sleeping in another room." "You taught me how to pretend," Ronan said quietly. "Now I'm just better at it." She stormed back into the house, and for the rest of the night, he didn't see her again. At 8:45 the next morning, Sierra arrived at the courthouse flanked by 2 attorneys from her firm. Her usual confidence was dulled by tension. She wore a sleek black suit and oversized sunglasses, but her posture was rigid. Ronan entered alone, with Mason and his mother beside him. Lorna sat quietly, her hands folded over a knit shawl, a strength in her eyes that hadn't been there weeks earlier. Judge Hartley, a stern woman in her early 60s, wasted no time. "This hearing concerns the legality of amendments made to the Blake family estate trust, and the potential exploitation of a vulnerable elder," she announced. "Mr. Blake, you may proceed." What followed was 2.5 hours of methodical evidence presentation. Dr. Evelyn Hart testified first, explaining the timeline of Lorna's dementia diagnosis and how her condition would have impaired her understanding of any legal documents signed during that period. Rachel Tan, the forensic accountant, followed. She broke down every suspicious transaction, from investment account liquidations to the lavish purchases paid for with Lorna's funds. Then came Lauren Ellis, nervous but direct. "I notarized the document without the signer present. It was a mistake, an ethical violation I deeply regret." The judge nodded grimly. "Thank you for your honesty." Finally, Ronan took the stand. His testimony wasn't emotional, it was focused. Measured. He outlined his deployments, his trust in Sierra, the red flags he noticed, and the steps he took to confirm them. He ended with a simple statement. "I swore to protect my family. I never thought I'd be protecting them from someone inside it." When it was Sierra's turn, she tried to frame herself as a misunderstood caretaker. Ronan was never around. "I did what I had to do. I was trying to manage a declining situation." Her attorney passed out glossy brochures from the assisted living center and receipts for basic expenses, but they couldn't explain the missing funds, the altered documents, or the second apartment. Then Mason produced the final blow, a recorded call between Sierra and a local developer, discussing plans to break up the Blake property into luxury retreats, once the old lady is out of the picture. Judge Hartley listened in silence. When the audio ended, she removed her glasses. "I find the trust amendment invalid due to clear evidence of undue influence and the diminished capacity of the signer at the time," she ruled. "I am restoring the original trust in full. Furthermore, I am barring Sierra Blake from any fiduciary role or claim to the estate. All joint accounts will be frozen pending a full audit." She glanced at Sierra, her gaze piercing. "This matter will be referred to the state attorney's office for review of criminal charges related to elder financial exploitation." The gavel fell. It was over. Outside the courthouse, Ronan turned to his mother. Her eyes were wet, but she smiled. "I thought I'd lost everything," she whispered. "You didn't," Ronan said, squeezing her hand. "You still have your home. You still have me." And that was what mattered most. 1 week after the hearing, Ronan stood alone in the driveway of the Blake Ranch, his breath misting in the crisp morning air. A hawk circled high above the pasture, the wind stirring the pine trees like whispers of the past. For the first time in what felt like years, the land was quiet, not with the silence of dread, but with the stillness of peace. His mother, Lorna, now lived in the small cedar guest house his father had built 20 years ago, a cozy one-bedroom retreat with a stone fireplace, wrap-around porch, and wide windows that overlooked the northern fields. It had once been his father's workshop, filled with tools and half-finished carpentry projects. Now, with some repairs and new furniture, it had become a safe and familiar space for Lorna to spend her remaining years in dignity. She had a nurse named Maggie, a kind and patient woman who baked pies on Sundays and played old gospel records while Lorna rested. Her days were slow, peaceful, and filled with moments of clarity that made Ronan grateful for the fight he'd chosen to take on. The Blake Trust had been restored in full, with no trace of the amendments Sierra had tried to embed. All accounts had been secured, Sierra's access revoked, and a full forensic audit ordered. The court appointed Ronan and his cousin Leo, fresh out of law school and eager to do right by the family, as co-trustees of the estate. Sierra, on the other hand, had vanished from Montana entirely. He'd filed the divorce papers the day after the hearing. She didn't contest them. Not a call. Not an email. No threats. Nothing. Mason later found out through contacts that she had moved to Colorado, crashing with her younger sister in Aspen. The apartment she had leased in Billings was abandoned, the rent unpaid. A moving company had picked up 2 suitcases and nothing more. She had left everything behind. Ronan didn't feel vindicated. He didn't feel bitter, either. Just tired. In the evenings, he often returned to the old porch, a mug of coffee in hand, letting the night wind whisper through the oaks and pines. It was on one of these evenings, a month after the court ruling, that Mason called with an update. The DA's office is moving forward with charges, he said. Fraud, elder exploitation, wire transfer fraud, and abuse of power of attorney. It's going to trial. Ronan exhaled slowly. Let me know if I need to testify. You might. But even without it, the evidence is enough. What's she looking at? Could be 5 to 10 years, Mason replied. Maybe more. Ronan didn't say anything for a long time. The idea of Sierra, his wife, his partner of 7 years, being handcuffed and led into a courtroom felt like a movie he didn't want to watch. The betrayal had cut so deep, it bypassed anger and went straight into numb acceptance. I'm sorry, Ronan, Mason added softly. She knew exactly what she was doing. I know, Ronan said. That's the part that hurts the most. The community had heard whispers of what happened. Redvale was small, and word always found a way to spread. People stopped him in the grocery store to ask how his mother was doing. Some offered meals, others prayers. A few confessed they'd always felt something off about Sierra, the way she smiled too brightly, her sudden interest in community committees and real estate boards. The worst had passed, but the rebuilding was slow. He turned part of the ranch's upper barn into a therapy space for local veterans. Nothing official, just a quiet corner with a heater, a few chairs, and a coffee pot that was always full. Word got around. By spring, 6 veterans showed up regularly, just to talk, to help with repairs, or to sit in silence with someone who understood what it meant to feel like a stranger in your own home. And slowly, the land itself seemed to breathe easier. The southern pasture, once targeted by Sierra's real estate dreams, blossomed again with wildflowers. Ronan planted new saplings along the fence line. He cleaned out the stables and repaired the irrigation system his father had installed by hand 30 years ago. Some days, he would find old photographs in the attic, his parents in their younger days, arms around each other under the same tree where he now sat. He framed them and placed them in Lorna's new home. One afternoon, she looked up from her rocking chair and smiled. Your father would be proud of you. Ronan swallowed the lump in his throat. I hope so. He always said character is what shows up when no one's watching. Ronan nodded, remembering. And for the first time in a long while, he believed it. He didn't dwell on Sierra anymore. There was nothing left to confront. Her actions had carved a wound into his life, but wounds healed. Scars faded. The land, his land, remained. And that was enough. In the months that followed, Ronan reconnected with people he'd pushed away during the chaos of war and betrayal. Old friends came to visit. A neighbor dropped by with fresh eggs and asked if Ronan wanted to help coach the high school cross-country team. Lorna, on good days, would hum along with her records and retell stories about his father and their early days on the ranch. Maggie kept things running smoothly, and Leo turned out to be a meticulous, loyal co-trustee. By fall, the ranch felt alive again. Safe. Settled. One night, while sitting beneath the stars, Ronan opened an old letter from his father, one he'd found hidden behind a drawer in the study. It was dated 5 years before his death. If you're reading this, son, it means I'm gone, and you're standing where I once stood, shouldering what I once carried. You're stronger than you think. The land will whisper its truths to you if you stay still long enough to listen. Don't let the noise of the world drown out what matters. Protect the legacy. And forgive where you can, but never forget what you've learned. Ronan folded the letter and placed it back in its envelope. The wind picked up again, rustling through the trees. He sat in silence, not as a man broken by betrayal, but as one rebuilt by truth. And as the night settled around the old oak trees, the Blake family legacy stood, unshaken. Right where it belonged,